I'm the Executive Director of Mata Festival, Chris McIntyre, and I'm sitting here with composer Julian Day from Australia. He is here with us to be a witness to his new piece on Wednesday, April 21st, being performed by pianist Lisa Moore. This piece is called Bad Blood. It was commissioned by Mata for this year's festival, and we're very excited to have Julian actually in the borough with us. Why don't you just kind of tell us about the piece, anything you want to tell us, like, you know, any kind of inspirational aspects, what brought you to the piece itself, and I know that you had a couple of different ideas that you were working with at one point. Maybe you can talk about that process and then what your final decision making was for that.
Sure thing. Well, firstly, the piece Bad Blood kind of came out from my real inability to play the piano myself, or to play it well. It's actually my first instrument, and I spent a good decade trying to master this thing.
I'm in the same boat.
But, you know, no matter how hard I tried, I could never get around the basic classic repertoire, you know, your Mozart, your Schubert, your Brahms. Something about trying to make it a lyrical, virtuosic, kind of mysterious, alchemical object never quite worked in my head. I actually remember, it's a very embarrassing moment, I can't believe I'm bringing it back up again.
On video,
no less. In my final recital, after spending years at music school trying to learn the piano, actually breaking down halfway through, trying to tackle a simple Brahms piece, and just realizing at that moment, I'm never going to be a good pianist. What I did learn, however, was how to play loud, how to play repetitive rhythms, how to play additive rhythms, basically. And that's something that anyone can learn. You know, you can learn the strength to tackle this as a big object, and you can learn how to count. I mean, you can do that on the bus, when you're walking, that sort of thing. And what I was listening to at the time was a lot of hip-hop, a lot of cut and paste kind of sampling kind of stuff, a lot of DJ Shadow, DJ Crush, The Avalanches, a great Aussie group. And so I started to try and transcribe what I was listening to on my Walkman to the piano, and to treat it as a real percussive object. Because after all, well, in my mind anyway, piano is a percussion instrument. And so when it came to writing for Lisa, you know, as you say, I had a lot of different ideas swirling around in my head. Couldn't quite decide what to do. But when I actually sat down and started playing, that's what came out. It was this very driven kind of percussive kind of approach. And thinking back to my early interest in hip-hop and sampling. And that's how the piece was kind of born, I guess.
And so, can you play it?
I can play very slowly. And that's the thing, I mean, I know that Lisa is an amazing pianist, and as long as I've been into, you know, serious new music, Lisa's been a name in my satellite. Must have been one of the first people in Australia to have bought that first Bang on a Can All-Stars disc. And I was just always really impressed by her commitment to music. But, you know, like I said earlier, virtuosity is not really something that, it doesn't really appeal to me, but it's not something I can really do as a composer. So what I wanted to give her was just something that she could really just get her hands under and just belt the crap out of this instrument. But which might also be something that I could sort of, you know, tentatively stagger through if I put my mind to it.
And you were able to work with her directly for some time. She was actually in Australia for a while, right?
Yeah, but the ironic thing was, she was in Australia for a good month or two, and she had some big concerts. I was too busy writing the piece still that we never actually hooked up properly. Plus, Australia being a big country meant she was doing some great work over in Adelaide, but you know, saving up for a trip to New York, could I get to Adelaide? It's, you know, I decided that we'd simply meet up here.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, it's funny. Americans are terrible with this. It's like, oh well, it's Australia. I mean, you guys, isn't it just around the corner from each other?
You know, it's a good a 5-hour flight to such and such a town and that sort of thing. So,
well, yeah. I mean, I've only seen it. I haven't heard any of it, but it looks like a lot of fun to play, actually. So, but it's very different from the music of yours that I have heard of, for the most part, otherwise.
Oh, look, I would definitely say that as a composer, I'm a work in progress. And I hope I always am. I hope I'm always sort of exploring new territory. And I think as a listener too, I'm a real omnivore. I'll listen to anything. As long as it grabs me and it's compelling in some way or does something a bit different, then I'll listen to it. You know, style is not an issue. And I think that comes through in my music. I have a lot of different sort of pools of interest. I suppose for me the key things are I'm in love with sound. And so I love finding beautiful or arresting or somehow unusual sound worlds and luxuriating in them.
Yeah.
And a lot of those ambient sort of process-driven works are me just really wanting to wander through a sonic landscape and immerse myself in it. But by the same token, I'm really captivated by very brutal, almost pig-headed approaches to music, and music that pushes you beyond your threshold a little, and really drives you. And you know, I grew up in as far removed from a classical household as possible. My dad's one and only music profession was as a rock singer in a band, and I grew up with with the instruments of rock around me. You know, my early playthings were guitars and microphones and synths.
Yeah, nice.
So I've always had a great interest in just propulsive, sort of primal rhythm.
Yeah.
And I think I was saying in my earlier draft of my program note that for me hip hop, which is kind of the rhythms that have inspired this piece, seems to me, even though I'm not a big part of the culture, I'm a white guy from the burbs, I really see it as a very sort of important musical form, like one of the real key music forms of the latter half of the 20th century.
Yeah.
To my mind anyway, it conjures up the kind of things that were promised by early Stravinsky, the kind of the primitive rhythm-oriented work, the sound objects of Varese, the Sprechstimme, the spoken word of Schoenberg. It's all there in hip-hop.
Right.
And I kind of wanted to sort of pay tribute almost to this work.
Nice.
Right.
So what else are you doing right now? What are you working on? Are there things on the horizon for you right now?
Yeah, well, pretty much every day that I'm not out exploring this quite astonishing town of New York City, I'm chained back to the laptop, putting the finishing touches on a piece which is happening back home. It's for the ICM World New Music Days, which is happening in Sydney for the first time ever in its many-decade history.
Right.
And that's actually for a Bang on Account All-Stars lineup. They're playing some of the All-Stars pieces with a new set of musicians, and I'm writing a new piece for that, which is also sort of a driven kind of rock kind of thing. But I'm also working on some bigger projects of my own, including some sort of gallery installation projects for multiple turntables and multiple CD players, which again sort of explore this kind of more ambient approach. And also a big project called Super Critical Mass, which is bringing together up to 100 different performers, all on the same instrument, and playing around in unusual spaces like abandoned warehouses, public malls, and just playing with density and mass. Again, it's this kind of love of the beauty of sound and what you can do physically with it. So I'm pursuing a few different paths.
Yeah, and do you have are there any performances planned for the Super
Critical Mass?
Yeah.
We launched it about 18 months ago with about 80 flutes in a big old abandoned railway shed in the inner suburbs of Sydney.
Okay.
Beautiful sort of concrete cathedral-like sound. We're doing a couple of residencies back in Australia in, I guess like here, a lot of older spaces which would have been slated for demolition are being made into art spaces. And so we've been invited by a couple of those to do some periods of development on the project.
Right.
And then later in the year I'm heading to the UK for a few months to start drumming up some interest in establishing some performances with it there. To sound out some venues, try and find some interested parties.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
That's why I asked. Hello. Is anybody there?
My website, by the way.
yeah, please.
Well, it's julianday.com.
Yeah.
And you can read about some of these projects. You can hear some of the sounds. You can hear what 80 flute sounds like.
Yeah.
And you can hear some of these more sort of evocative ambient landscapes. We'll see where it goes.
Julian Day. Please come and see Julian's new piece, Bad Blood, at Le Poisson Rouge on April 21st. Pianist Lisa Moore on the same program is the first half Ensemble Pamplemousse playing their music, and then a toy piano piece by three-toy piano piece by Tristan Parrish, and then Lisa's set. Julian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
And see you next week.